When my husband's colleague looked at me across the cheese board at his firm's holiday party and said, "No offense, Lila, but you just don't really seem like someone in Carter's league." My husband laughed into his bourbon and said, "She keeps herself busy." That was December 14th. I smiled. I put a thin slice of Gruyere on a cracker, and I smiled at Giselle like she'd said something charming. Then I excused myself to use the restroom, stood in front of the mirror under fluorescent light for exactly 2 minutes, and decided what came next. 3 weeks later, at 2:47 in the morning, his best friend called me from a number I didn't recognize. His voice was completely wrecked. "Leela, please pick up. Something happened tonight and it's about you." Let me go back. Carter and I met 7 years ago at a rooftop fundraiser in Wicker Park. He was with an architecture firm then, not yet a partner, but already talking like one. He had a way of holding a room, the kind of presence that made people lean in when he spoke. I was there because my college roommate dragged me. I was mid-launch of what I would have described, at that point, as a very small online shop selling handmade textile goods. He asked what I did. I told him I made things. He said that was interesting in a tone that meant he didn't find it interesting at all. But he was handsome and funny, and for a long time he made me feel like being noticed by him was the same as being seen. We moved in together after 18 months. I bought the condo, a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a converted building in Lincoln Park, 6 months before we got engaged. My name was on the deed. That was a detail Carter seemed to forget almost immediately, and one I never corrected him on. We got married in September at a vineyard in the Finger Lakes. Small wedding, just family and close friends. Carter cried during his vows. He promised to always look at me, really look, not just see the surface. For a while, I believed he meant it. Here is what Carter knew about my work over 7 years of marriage. I made things textiles, handmade goods. I had an online shop. I worked from home. I sometimes had afternoon calls he assumed were with suppliers or craft cooperatives. He told his parents I was really into the maker movement. The way you describe a hobby you tolerate because you love the person who has it. Here is what Carter did not know. 3 years ago, my college roommate Amara and I co-founded a company called Sorel Studio. Amara had a background in supply chain logistics and sustainable sourcing. I had design expertise and a growing list of boutique clients who trusted my aesthetic instincts. Together, we built a luxury sustainable textile brand, hand-loomed fabrics, small batch production, limited runs sold to high-end interior designers and boutique fashion houses across the country and in Europe. We were discreet by design. Our clients valued discretion. Our LLC structure kept our names private. We liked it that way. Our first year, we grossed $620,000. Second year, $2.1 million. Last year, $3.8 million. 6 months ago, a lifestyle conglomerate out of New York, the kind of company whose brands you've definitely interacted with without knowing it, approached us about an acquisition. 2 weeks before Carter's firm holiday party, I signed the papers. $8.5 million for 60% of the company. My share, after splitting with Amara and paying out our early investors, came to $4.2 million. I hadn't told Carter any of it. I know how that sounds. I've spent a year sitting with how that sounds, and I still don't have a clean answer. The honest one is this. Carter had been the successful one in our marriage from the start, the partner, the one with the title, the trajectory, the LinkedIn profile his colleagues congratulated. Whenever we went to work events or dinner parties, he'd introduce me as his wife who does some handmade textile work, and then spend 20 minutes talking about his latest project, while I stood nearby and smiled and answered, "I make fabric goods," when someone finally turned to ask about me, watched their eyes drift, and moved on. Early on, I'd tried to tell him about Amara's idea. I said we were thinking about starting something together. He said that sounded fun in the voice of someone already thinking about something else. After a while, I stopped bringing it up. I told myself I was giving him space to be proud. I told myself a good partner doesn't compete. What I was actually doing, I understand it fully now, was building a wall around something I loved so it couldn't get dismissed before it had a chance to become real. The wall got higher every year. On the drive home from the holiday party, Carter was loosened up from the open bar, relaxed in the passenger seat while I drove through the dark Chicago streets. After a few minutes of quiet, he said, "Giselle wasn't trying to be harsh, she just says what she thinks." I know. I said. She has a point though. He said it like it was obvious, like he'd been carrying the thought for a while and was relieved to set it down. I've been thinking about it honestly. You don't really have momentum. Not a direction. People notice, Lila. My friends notice. And I've started to as well. I kept my hands on the wheel. I didn't say anything. I'm not trying to hurt you, he said. I'm being honest, because I think that's what we're supposed to do. We're at a stage in life where trajectory matters, and I don't see yours. I pulled into the parking garage under our building. I turned off the engine. The concrete around us was very quiet. Okay, I said. Okay? I hear you, Carter. He looked almost relieved, like he'd braced for a fight and gotten surrender instead. He patted my knee. He said he was glad we could talk about it like adults. I held the elevator door for him. I made myself a glass of water. I went to bed. The next morning, while he was still sleeping, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and made a reservation. The Gnome Garden at the Park Hyatt Chicago, a private dining room on the 14th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows over the magnificent mile. A reservation that required 3 months and a credit card hold that made most people pause. I had been holding it for 2 months, originally planned as a quiet New Year's Eve for 2. I changed the party size to 8. Then I checked my email and found the message from our business attorney, confirming the first acquisition installment had cleared. Then I made coffee. When Carter came into the kitchen, I told him I was canceling our New Year's plans. I said I needed space to think about some things. He looked startled. I said it without drama or tears, the way you deliver information that has already been decided. Space, he said. Yes. Because of what I said last night. Because there are things I need to sort through, I said. He left that afternoon for his best friend Finn's apartment in Bucktown. I watched him pack from the bedroom doorway, his back to me, folding shirts with the focused precision of someone performing calm. Before he zipped the suitcase, I said it. Before you go, I want to tell you something about what I've actually been building. He kept packing. Leela, can we do this later? My company was just acquired, I said. $8.5 million. My personal share is 4.2. He went still. He turned around slowly, like a man hearing a language that almost sounds familiar but doesn't quite parse. I have a business, I said. Amara and I started it 3 years ago. We build luxury textiles for interior designers and fashion houses. Clients in 11 states and 4 countries. The papers closed December 2nd. His mouth opened. Nothing came out for a long moment. So take your time at Finn's, I said. Think about trajectory. Think about whether my goals match yours. And don't cancel New Year's Eve. Your friends are all invited. I have a reservation. It's going to be memorable. He stood in the doorway with his suitcase, trying to find words in the wreckage of his assumptions. He didn't find any. The front door closed behind him. I sat down at the kitchen table and finished my coffee. The next 14 days were the quietest I'd spent in years. I wasn't sad, exactly. It felt more like finally exhaling after holding my breath through something long and exhausting. I slept well. I cooked what I actually wanted. I met Amara for lunch at our favorite place in the West Loop and told her everything. She set down her fork and looked at me steadily and said, "You've been carrying this alone for 3 years. That stops now." Carter texted every day, sometimes more than once. Day 1. I shouldn't have said that. Can we please just talk? Day 4. Finn says I'm the idiot here. He might be right. Can we talk? Day 7. I looked up Sorel Studio online. I don't understand. How long? Why didn't you tell me? Day 9. I'm sorry. I think I've been sorry for a long time without understanding what I was sorry for. Please let me say it in person. Day 11. Are you talking to a lawyer? Tell me if I need to get a lawyer. I didn't respond to a single one. In my work, crisis management for brands, essentially, I'd learned what silence does that words cannot. It fills a room with the other person's worst thoughts. It lets them imagine every possible outcome until they've terrified themselves with their own imagination. I let Carter's thoughts fill the silence. I let him sit with what he'd done, without me there to soften it. On day 5, I met with an attorney named Helena, recommended by my accountant with 6 words. She is thorough and she wins. Her office was in the Gold Coast. Clean lines, a conference table that meant business, the specific quiet of a room where serious decisions get made. I brought a folder 2 inches thick, The condo deed, predating our marriage by 6 months. 3 years of business tax returns filed separately. Personal accounts that had never been commingled with marital funds. 18 months of bank transfers to our joint account, covering the gap after Carter's firm restructured and reduced his salary by 22%. Helena spread everything out and studied it with the focus of someone who doesn't miss things. "This is unusual," she said. "Most of my clients are here trying to establish the value of contributions that don't appear on paper: childcare, household management, emotional support. You're sitting here with a paper trail." "I know," I said. "The condo is separate property, clearly, purchased before the marriage. Your name has always been on the deed. The business is more complex. Illinois divides marital assets, but a business built with premarital capital and independently operated can often be protected if you can demonstrate your spouse made no contribution to its development." "He didn't know it existed until last week," I said. Helena allowed a small, precise smile. "Document everything. Every financial contribution you made to supporting his career, every transfer, any loans that were never repaid." She made a note on her legal pad. "I'll have preliminary papers ready within 10 days. I took the train home through the gray December afternoon, the lake flat and colorless out the window, and thought about the strange geometry of the last 3 years. I had been the foundation of a household while appearing to be a guest in it. The math was simple, and the math was devastating. New Year's Eve, the Nomi Garden. 14 floors up, Chicago spread out below us like a circuit board lit from within, the lake black beyond it. I arrived at 7:30, connected my laptop to the room's presentation screen and ran through my slides once. The acquisition announcement, our revenue trajectory year by year, the financial timeline, every transfer, every covered shortfall, the paper record of support I'd given without ever naming it as such. Then I went to the bar and ordered sparkling water and waited. Finn and his girlfriend Darcy arrived first, at 7:50. Finn had the careful posture of someone who suspects they've walked into something they don't fully understand. The maître led them to the private room. 2 minutes later, Remy and her husband arrived. Remy, who worked 2 floors above Carter at his firm and had met me exactly 4 times, always briefly, always at the perimeter of conversations about his projects. I watched them through the glass partition, settling in, pouring water, checking their phones, making the careful small talk of people who don't know each other well enough to be honest. Giselle arrived at 7:58 in a red dress that was built for arriving. She moved through the room like she owned it, which I had always found more tiring than impressive. Carter came at 8:12, coat still on, scanning the room with the particular expression of a man hoping for one thing and beginning to understand he will get another. He found his friends. Then he found me. He walked over, performing calm. "What is this?" he said quietly. "Your New Year's dinner," I said. "Come on, everyone's waiting." I walked to the private room. He followed. The conversation stopped when we entered. I stood at the head of the table and let the silence do its work for exactly 5 seconds before I spoke. "Thank you all for coming. I wanted Carter to start this year surrounded by the people whose opinions he values most." I glanced at Giselle once, briefly, and moved on. "And since I know how much weight those opinions carry, I thought you should be here for what I have to share." Carter was still standing, coat still on. "Sit down," I said gently. "This is for you." He sat. I connected my laptop. The first slide appeared on the screen, the Sorel Studio logo, clean, spare, something I designed myself at the kitchen table 3 years ago while Carter slept 10 feet away. Beneath the logo, acquired by Hargrove Collective, December 2. I heard Finn draw a breath. "For the past 3 years," I said, "I've been the co-founder and creative director of Sorel Studio, a luxury sustainable textile company. We design and produce hand-loomed fabrics for interior designers, boutique fashion houses, and hospitality brands across the country and in 4 international markets. Our work has been featured in Architectural Digest 3 times. We were named one of Forbes' most innovative design brands last spring. At no point during any of this did my husband ask what I was working on. I let that land." I advanced the slide, revenue figures, year by year. The room was completely still. "Last month, we finalized an acquisition with the Hargrove Collective. $8.5 million for 60% of the company. I advanced to the acquisition letterhead. The actual number, in clean black type. My personal share, net of my partner's equity and investor distributions, is $4.2 million. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I could feel the recalibration happening in real time. All these people who'd constructed a version of me from Carter's shorthand, trying to match that version to the woman standing at the head of the table with a projector remote. One more thing, I said. The next slide. Bank statements, my account and our joint account, side by side, showing 18 months of transfers. After Carter's firm restructured and cut his salary, I quietly covered the shortfall from my business account, enough to keep our household running without disruption. $61,000 over 18 months. He believed his own income was handling it. It wasn't. I heard Carter make a sound I couldn't name. I didn't look at him. The condo we live in, I purchased it 6 years ago before we married. My name is on the deed. Carter moved in with me after the wedding. The renovation we did 2 summers ago, I paid for it. The furniture. The car in his name that I put a down payment on for his birthday 2 years ago. $12,000, a surprise. All of it funded by the woman who keeps herself busy. I disconnected my laptop. The screen went to white. I never thought of any of this as keeping score, I said quietly. I thought it was partnership. I thought making space for someone else's success while building your own quietly in the background was what love looked like. I thought being in the background was generous. I looked at Carter directly, for the first time since I'd walked into the room. He looked gray. His hands were flat on the table. I was wrong about that. You don't love someone by making yourself invisible. You just teach them you aren't worth looking for. I picked up my bag. I paid for this dinner, every course, every wine pairing, every minute of this room. Consider it a going-away gift. I looked at each face around the table. Finn, who couldn't meet my eyes. Darcy, whose expression was unreadable. Remy, who looked like she was doing math. Giselle, whose red dress suddenly seemed several sizes too large for the person sitting inside it. Enjoy the meal. The chef here is genuinely exceptional. I walked out. The air outside was below 30. The kind of Chicago cold that makes your face feel honest. I walked the 2 blocks to the parking structure and I did not look back once. I drove home on familiar streets that felt completely unfamiliar. I turned my phone off. I fell asleep on the couch, sometime before midnight, and didn't dream. At 2:47 in the morning, Finn called from a number I almost didn't answer. I picked up. Leela. His voice was wrecked. I'm sorry to call this late. I have to tell you what happened after you left. I sat up in the dark. Go ahead. He told me. Carter had tried to reframe it immediately, said, I'd been building toward this moment. That the dinner was orchestrated to humiliate him. Finn said he'd pulled up the Forbes piece on his phone. The brand profile that had run 6 months earlier. Our names right there, our faces, the whole story, and held it up without a word. Carter stopped talking. Giselle had apologized. Not to Carter. To the table. Said she'd made a judgment without knowing anything real, that she'd been careless and she was sorry. She'd said it quietly, looking at her hands. Carter cried, Finn said. In the elevator on the way down. Real crying. And I don't know, Lila. I've been trying to figure out for 2 hours whether he's crying because he hurt you or because everyone found out. I can't tell which one it is. That's the right question, I said. That's exactly the right question. Is there any chance, Finn asked, any chance at all? No, I said. A long silence. He never asked, I said. 7 years, Finn. He never once asked what I was building. He decided he already knew the whole story of me, and he was comfortable with the version that required nothing from him. You can't walk back from 7 years of not wanting to know. Another silence. Then, I didn't ask either. All those dinners I never asked you anything real. No, I said, but you called at 3 in the morning to apologize for it. That's different. We said goodnight. I went back to sleep. Outside, Chicago finished its new year without me, and I slept better than I had in months. The press coverage came fast. The acquisition had already generated trade coverage, and a features editor at Inc. magazine had connected my name to what had apparently circulated from the dinner. Remy had told someone who told someone, the way these things always travel. By mid-January, I was fielding interview requests from 5 national outlets. I gave 2, one to Inc. focused on the business model and our sourcing methodology, one to a design industry podcast. I kept both centered on the work, on what Amara and I had built. The personal details were context. The company was the story. Helena filed the dissolution papers in late January. Carter had retained his own attorney, an aggressive choice who opened with a claim that Carter deserved consideration for supporting my career during the marriage. Helena sent over the folder, all $61,000 of transfers, the condo deed, the startup capital drawn entirely from premarital savings, the 3 years of tax returns. She was thorough. She won. Amara and I signed a lease on a proper studio space in the West Loop in February. Exposed brick, north-facing skylights, the kind of light that makes fabric look exactly like itself. We hired 6 people. We took on 3 new flagship clients. We bought a coffee machine that cost more than my first car, and none of us felt guilty about it for a single second. In March, I spoke at a women's entrepreneurship summit in Minneapolis. 500 people in a hotel ballroom. I talked about what it cost to manage someone else's confidence at the expense of your own. About the years I'd spent building in silence because I was afraid. Silence was safer than visibility. About the particular exhaustion of being the person who is always the one creating room for someone else to take up space. After the session, a woman maybe 26 years old found me near the exit. She was holding herself together carefully, the way you do when you're in public and something has cracked open. My husband calls my business a hobby, she said. He says if it were real, I'd have a business card. I looked at her. Do you have revenue? She nodded. 78,000 last year. Then it's a business, I said. He doesn't have to call it one for it to be one. She nodded slowly. Ask yourself one question, I said. Does being with him make you feel bigger or smaller? Does your life with him expand what you think is possible, or does it shrink it? If the answer is shrink, you already know what you're moving toward. She thanked me and walked away with the kind of posture that tells you a decision has already been made. I watched her go and thought about all the women who learn their own worth in the space someone else created by leaving, and all the ones who are still waiting for permission to take up room. The condo in Lincoln Park is still mine. I repainted the bedroom in January, a warm white that catches the morning light off the lake. I drink coffee by the window and I think about what I'm building next. I think about the woman in Minneapolis. I think about what it means that I spent 7 years deciding I needed to be invisible to be loved, and how spectacularly, helpfully wrong I turned out to be. Amara asked me once if I regret the years I spent in secret. I told her I regret the hiding. I don't regret the building. I built something real while everyone was looking somewhere else, and that turned out to be the most clarifying thing I've ever done. Not because the money changed anything about who I am, but because doing it proved something to me that nobody else's opinion could have. That remarkable isn't a title someone gives you when they finally decide to look. It's what you keep doing when nobody's watching. Especially that.